Okay, everybody, this is Hysteria, which is the podcast for people who chase their dreams with the confidence of Corey Lewandowski romantically pursuing a woman who's much hotter than he is. No, Corey Lewandowski is, by all accounts, a very bad person, a real bastard. But in terms of confidence, he is inspirational.
Yes, agree. Totally.
He dated Hope Hicks, didn't he?
Yes.
He dated Hope Hicks. He's now currently dating Kristi Noem, the married governor of South Dakota, who is a terrible person, but beautiful on the outside.
I mean, Miss North Dakota, right? Wasn't she Miss North Dakota?
Was she Miss South Dakota?
Which she was a Miss Dakota. She was a Miss Dakota.
She's from South Dakota. She looks like a Miss South Dakota. There's something about all of this just messy shit with Republicans, including, well, look, Lauren Boebert, my alt opener for news was to chase your dreams with confidence. Don't fumble at them like Lauren Boebert over the zipper of a pair of Dockers during a Sunday night performance of Beetlejuice. There's something that seems so arrested about the way that these people are conducting themselves. Mm-hmm. Like, they're acting like teenagers on a field trip.
That is the perfect explanation. I was going to say that they also feel like freshmen in college who have never seen alcohol before.
Yes.
And then they all get the nickname Detox.
Yeah, right. Or like Keg Stand. Oh, yeah. Here. Oh, which Kelly are you talking about? Are you talking about Kelly Murphy? No. Keg Stand Kelly.
Keg Stand Kelly.
Yeah. It just, I think that this is the sort of behavior that happens when you do not get your yayas out and you live your whole life as an attempt to push down your instincts, and like you're putting your life aside so that you can do what you think you're supposed to do, but really deep down what you want to do is like, I feel like Kristi Noem, is terrible. But her biography is kind of like, there's a sadness to it. I think she dropped out of either high school or college when her dad died to help with her family farm. Like, there were things that she did in her life that prevented her from, like, having a rumspringa in her 20s.
Okay.
She got married. She had kids. I think she's got 3 kids. And she's like, anyway, yeah. Now she's cheating on her husband with a man who looks like a micro penis. So, yeah. I don't know.
So
Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Like, what's, I don't know.
Well, like if she was going to have an affair, I mean, like, look, if you're going to look on the continuum of things, wouldn't you do it with someone a little bit more interesting like Matt Gaetz? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Really blow people's dicks off.
Yeah. Like, let's get into it. If you're going to go for it, go for it. Cool. Corey Lewandowski is like a snore.
He's like a D-list person.
He's a D-list snore.
Yeah, he's a D-list snore. I wish, really go blockbuster. She should have gone for like a movie star. Yeah. Or like a country singer.
McCarthy, anybody. Do something a little bit, get us a little more excited.
Yeah, throw a little zhuzh in there, Kristi, because this was a boring move. I mean, and a lot of people have speculated in the New York Post piece that quoted people saying this was like an open secret for a long time. A lot of people speculated that this is because Noem was being seriously considered to be
VP.
The running mate of President Trump, assuming that he gets the nomination and is not in jail. And so, yeah, the gloves are off. People are going to start to plant stories or not plant stories. People are going to start to talk.
Yeah.
People who know things, who don't want people to be the vice presidential nominee are going to start to talk.
To the Post.
To the Post. Well, because that's the only newspaper that conservatives read.
It's true.
I also wanted to flag real quick. There was a really good piece in The Atlantic this week by Adam Serwer, who everything he writes is good. Mm-hmm. But he sort of highlights the fact that in some media people are kind of falling for Trump's attempt to rebrand himself as moderate on abortion. And Serwer's piece kind of reminds us that Trump is the reason that this whole mess exists in the first place.
Totally.
So he doesn't get to pretend like only I can solve the problem that I caused. It's like
it's one of two things, his new position on abortion. It's that, most likely, or it's that someone's about to dime him for having paid for a couple, which we have suspected for a long time. So either way, either way, he gets no credit for his new position.
And its new position is just talk about abortion differently. It's not govern differently. It's talk about abortion differently. And I think that the issue here is that Republicans know that in order to raise money from their base, they have to talk about like banning abortion and like banning birth control, because that gets their base of bedridden Fox News delusional people. It gets them riled up and it gets them to like donate their disability checks to
his legal defense fund.
To his legal defense fund, which is actually true. When Trump first lost the election in 2020, they did an analysis of what the primary source of income was for people who were donating to his legal defense fund, and one of the primary sources of income for people was being on disability.
I did not know that.
Yeah, which is
that is fucking terrible.
Deeply sad. Deeply sad. Anyway, so I think that what Republicans want is to have messaging that gets people to donate to them, but they know that their messaging is going to get them to lose elections. So the only way for them to win elections is to have their abortion cake and eat it too.
And we will not stand for that.
No, that's bullshit. You don't get to weasel your way out of this, you goddamn weasels.
No.
It's weasel. Weasel behavior. Weasel behavior.
This may be the second time we've used weasel in like 3 weeks.
I like it.
It's a great word.
I like it. And it is very evocative if you've ever had chickens and dealt with weasels. They are fucking bad little guys.
Weasels.
Bad little guys. Bad little guys. Speaking of bad little guys, this is really unsurprising news. Alyssa, as you noted to me as we were discussing this over text, you thought that this had already been exposed.
I thought he was already like convicted of something.
Yeah. Russell Brand, not a good guy.
No.
Over the weekend, the Sunday Times, the Times, and Channel 4 Dispatches, all reputable outlets with real journalists who did real journalism to produce this. They published a massive report about Brand and some of the women he has sexually assaulted, abused, and even raped. One of the victims written about in the piece was only 16 when they had a relationship. The details in the piece are horrifying.
Like disgusting, like stomach churning.
Truly disgusting. Something that I think should be noted is that the women that came forward in the piece don't know each other.
Right.
They had no way to communicate with each other. He just sounds like a sex, like a beyond a sex pest.
He's worse
like
than a sex pest. He's a predator.
He's a predator. He's a predator. And he's gotten away with it for a really long time. The instances that they talk about span from, I think, 2006 to 2013. As you and I both know, Alyssa, when journalists publish things like this, they don't publish everything they have.
Right, of course not.
Because there's always stuff that they couldn't quite get the final confirmation on. So you can kind of rest assured that whatever is in this piece, and it's a lot. It is a long piece and it's a lot. There's more to it. There is also a documentary about it. And it's really intense. If it's like a sensitive topic for you to hear about, you might not want to read about it or watch the documentary, but it's pretty crazy. Brand is responding. Brand is kind of responding in a typical kind of predator flail, I would say. The Times and Sunday Times gave Brand and his team 8 days to reply to the allegations. That always happens before publication publishes something. Like I've talked about on the podcast, it bothers me when like in movies, the antagonist is like watching the news and they see a news story about them and they're like, what? It's like, no, they should have reached out to you before to confirm the details. Anyway, so they reached out to Brand 8 days before the story ran to be like, look, this is what we've got. What is your reply? Because even if the allegations could be proven false, that is also a story. You know, then why are these stories floating on? But, you know, they didn't respond at first. They wouldn't give him the names of the women. His team characterized it as part of a preconceived strategy aimed at damaging Brand. They said that it was a campaign against Brand because he's outside of the mainstream media.
What? Jesus Christ.
Dude, I have never heard of your show. Like,
ever. I didn't even realize he was into wellness until I read this article.
Yeah. And, I've seen like speculation and people kind of highlighting different times that comedians have alluded to this for years. Like, there's clips of interviews of comedians being like, there's a fucking predator in comedy who's like really high up, and people protected him and people didn't say anything. And the only person who said anything was Daniel Sloss, who is I think he's a Scottish comic. He spoke on the record. He went on the documentary on camera. He said he'd heard the rumors more than 10 years ago. He said that female comics had set up online groups that they used to warn each other privately. In the article, the authors of the article said they'd seen some of the text messages. And Sloss said he's known for many years. He's also said that he feels like the only way for male comics to stop this is to call people out by name. You can't just stand by. Like, if you see the problem, but you're not actively working to solve the problem, you are part of the problem. And yeah. So, I mean, Alyssa, you thought that this was already a thing. You thought he was already
I was like, didn't we know he was a predator? Like, we knew he was really fucking mean to Katy Perry. I mean, I feel like that was well known, and she seems very nice. So that seems doubly terrible.
She seems like such a sweet lady.
Such a nice lady. And he seems to me, actually, like he does to me. I don't know. He looks like someone who was, okay. There was an episode a very long time ago of Law and Order SVU about a cult leader, and he looks like this guy, and I can't unsee that. Like, I've always been like, oh, he looks like a fucking shady dude. But like, you read these allegations, it is stomach turning. I mean, like, I think it is like Harvey Weinstein level predatory, disgusting
100%
behavior.
100%.
And, again, the reporters made the point, and I've seen it on news reports too, that this is a report. This is not the police. The police have not come after him. Like, this is literally just a news report at this point. And
well, just to say, I think journalists work harder than cops.
I mean,
when it comes to investigating sex crimes, I think journalists work way harder than the police do.
Yeah. I mean, this is disgusting, and I hope that he gets all of the consequences he deserves for this behavior.
Yeah, and the usual suspects are standing up for him. The people who are so contrarian, that their brains have become smooth. It's just it's the usual suspects, but there is an architecture of media out there, unfortunately, that basically exists to promote misogyny, and it is not the mainstream, but it, I'm sure, will welcome Brand with open arms. And it's just, it's a shame. But he's never going to be a mainstream star again.
No, never. Disgusting.
Yeah. What is it with like BBC presenters? Because he was a BBC presenter. So was like Jimmy Savile. Is that his name? Savile?
Yes.
Who is a sex monster.
Yeah.
Like, guys.
Well, no, Erin, maybe it's just that their sex predator pests are getting their comeuppance just a little far behind us, because we had some media sex pests too.
We did have some media sex pests, and a friend of mine pointed out that like he probably knew when Me Too happened about this stuff, and he probably knew it was only a matter of time. And so, he probably knew that this was coming, but it's crazy that he didn't do a better job preparing for it.
Yeah, that's you know what, Erin? That's hubris. That's him thinking that it may come for him, but he's got it. He's got it covered.
Yeah.
He's smarter than everybody.
And it's an archetype. I wonder how many more. It's because it's never like, all right, we got him. That's the last sex pest. They're all gone. Because there's always people who aim to achieve positions of power for the express purpose of hurting people, harming people, having what they believe is unfettered sexual access to people, being so powerful that they're able to do whatever they want to people without facing any consequences. For some people that are true monsters, that is the appeal of achieving success.
Right.
Like part of the package is you get to
Whatever
victimize
you want.
people.
Yes.
You can do whatever you want. And I'm sure that he's not the first, and I'm sure he won't be the last. But it is really good to see Daniel Sloss speaking out.
It was great.
And it is a shame that he's the only one that was willing to go on camera. All right, on to stateside news. Why is everybody so obsessed with Kamala Harris?
Oh, should we talk about misogyny again?
Yes, I guess we should.
Terrific. Erin, I am exhausted by hearing about Kamala, and it's not Kamala's fault. And I'm going to actually call her the vice president because she's the vice president, and I should have said that. Republican candidates are obsessed with the vice president. In particular, Nikki Haley, because you know what, Erin? If Nikki Haley is both a woman and a woman of color, she can't be misogynist or racist. Have you heard that?
Yeah, she can't possibly be self-hating enough to change her name to be more anglicized.
No. She says, Kamala's got a bit of a laugh, Erin, and therefore she's incompetent. This is exhausting. And I'm going to put the Republican candidates aside because I actually don't think they're the biggest problem. I mean, they're exploiting this idea that President Biden is too old, and therefore if they make Kamala a villain too, it'll be like, see, you can't vote for them because if something happens to him in his 80s, you're going to get her. And I mean, I see it as their playbook. It's not that confusing. But what is kind of confusing is why the media is buying into it. Why they are making it this sort of like legitimate argument that somehow there is something wrong with Vice President Kamala Harris. It's like, Erin, we had a vice president who was a woman once before, and her name was Selena Myers. And
I was like, what?
Yes. And the way that pundits talk about her, Vice President Harris has more in common with Selena Meyer than the 49 other vice presidents who have served our country. And right now, look, on the one hand, I think that Kamala was dealt a really tough hand. She was given the issue of immigration to handle as vice president, which all the work on earth that she could put into it, all of the good things she could accomplish, it is one of the most complicated issues this country has to tackle. And it's never going to be something where they're like, look at her, she killed it, she solved immigration. That's just not going to happen. And so I am excited to see her hitting the trail right now. She is out energizing the youth. Erin, one of our favorite news outlets, The 19th, has been reporting on her. She's starting on a college tour. Young people are some of the most important people we can get out to vote in 2024. And so, I'm hoping that this gives her an opportunity to sort of cast her own narrative and talk about the things that she's passionate about. She has been on the forefront of talking about abortion since Roe v. Wade was, overruled. And she's been doing great. And the fact that all anybody can say is like, she's got like an annoying laugh. What? And I don't know what it says about our country that right now there were aggregated polls done in July, Erin, that said her approval rating was lower than Dick Cheney. How can that be possible? I mean, I believe it to be so. It's also lower than Al Gore, who, remember, everybody found very boring and stiff. But it is like the vice presidency. Hold on. I have a quote that I wanted to pull that I found when I was researching this. John Adams called the vice presidency the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived or his imagination conceived. Being vice president is brutal. And I don't know, you and I talked about this, I think, back in 2020, that it's almost like we wanted a woman to be president before she was vice president because this was all very handwriting on the walls. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think this is a good preview of what the general election is going to be. It's going to be way more about Kamala Harris than it should be. bad faith, racism, sexism, etc. But I also wanted to flag that while Kamala Harris is like unpopular with the population at large, there are portions of the population that are very important to the Democratic vote that are really into Kamala Harris. Like, she's drawing big crowds on this college tour. She is, and I don't think the pundit class understands that, like, there's this kind of like stupidity, like insular thinking that a lot of the pundit class engages in a lot. And that's why I don't really watch cable news, because it's just like, oh my God, you guys, get out of fucking the Beltway. It's that they don't understand that there's an entire world out there, an entire country out there that doesn't necessarily think like them. And actually, they are the people that don't think like most people, that they all kind of hang out together and talk together, and they reinforce their own little weird subculture within American politics. But most people don't think and talk like they do. And I don't think that those people are necessarily like the voices of the people in any way, shape, or form. And when it comes to Kamala being unpopular, the way that pundits talk about her, it seems like they are like, well, nobody that I hang out with really thinks highly of her. So therefore, nobody thinks highly of her.
Right.
And that's just patently
And what
false.
about her makes them think not highly of her?
I don't know.
Right?
I have to put on my thinking cap.
Mm-hmm.
Gonna have to put on my
It's confusing, Erin.
I mean, on one hand, this is like a classic example of where it's never just sexism. It's never just racism. It's always tied up with other things that make you feel crazy for even suggesting or like trying to parse out the isms from the other things that they're tied up in. It is true that Kamala Harris has been handed a challenging slate of things to tackle. And some would say unfairly challenging, like immigration. That, oh my God.
Brutal.
Nobody, like, a brutal topic to tackle. And, you know, she's maybe not necessarily been utilized in a way that plays her strengths up. She's kind of been given tasks that it seems other people in the administration don't want to do. And so, yeah, on one hand, there are ways in which Kamala Harris's performance as certain aspects of like the vice presidency have been like underwhelming, disappointing. But I don't know if there's any possibility of anybody doing a better job. You know, so yeah, there are legitimate reasons to criticize Harris, but woven into those legitimate reasons are people that have like just a smidgen of the legit reason, but it's mostly sexism and racism. And there are people who just only have sexism and racism, and that's why like all the isms, when they're directed at you or you're witnessing them happening, they make you feel crazy. Because you're like, am I seeing this?
What am I seeing? What is going on here?
What is this? Like, is it possible that there's like a reason to criticize her and that people are being sexist and racist against her? And I think that's what we're looking at here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this election is already annoying as fuck. And we still have more than a year to go. And part of the reason, I'm not the only one who thinks this election is already annoying as fuck. Part of the reason I think it's annoying is because I don't trust a lot of what politicians say. We have seen over and over again that it doesn't really matter what politicians will say whatever it takes in public, especially like right-wing politicians. Hell, people will say whatever it takes in front of congressional testimony.
Oh, God.
In confirmation hearings, they'll say whatever it takes to get what they want. And then there is, and then if somebody calls them out for hypocrisy or calls them out for lying, they're like, whoops.
I just changed my mind.
Yeah, your fault for believing me. And yeah, I'm far from alone. The 19th News just released survey results from a comprehensive study on women in politics. And one of the major findings was that Americans, regardless of their political affiliation, don't trust politicians to make decisions about abortion and gender-affirming care. Yeah, no shit.
Yeah, sounds right.
These people could not label the anatomy of like the reproductive system if they were given like a cheat sheet. These people are absolute fucking science morons.
But the one thing that's interesting about said report is that even 58% of Republicans think politicians should not focus on the transgender issue.
Oh, okay. And yet here we are.
Here we are.
I think this is another example of what we talked about earlier, which is that focusing on the transgender issue matters to people who are willing to donate. to them. And so when they're yelling about this shit, it gets people who care about this care to a spectacularly creepy degree. Spectacularly creepy. And they're willing to support anybody who says the wildest shit about regulating bodily autonomy when it comes to trans people. Meanwhile, the majority of people are just like, what is it's I think it's literally
live and let live.
Yeah. Seriously. God. No, we couldn't possibly do that in this country. Can I say really quickly before we take a break and get to our interview, which I'm really excited for? What is Lauren Boebert doing? What is
Other
she
than
doing?
being gross?
What is she doing? Like, but why does she keep trying to, like, when she first got kicked out of the theater, she tried to play it off like, haha, it's funny. And it's like, okay, I guess she's like trying to be a good sport about some bad behavior. But the more that's come out about it, I'm like, bitch, what are you doing? This is not like, you can't turn this into a joke.
Yeah, you did it. You
What
did
are
it.
you
It's on
doing?
camera.
Girl, it's not funny.
It's not funny.
I mean, it would have been sort of funny if she was like, everybody should go to Beetlejuice. I went and I had a ball.
That would be funny. But if you're someone who's trying to regulate the behavior of everyone around you, you cannot be surprised when people become amused by your behavior.
Yeah. I also kind of was thinking like, she's getting a lot of flack for, there's footage because when you go to a theater of a live performance, they have cameras that are trained at the crowd in case there's like a medical emergency that are like kind of infrared low light cameras. It's a security reason. Like people can see what you're doing. It's a bad place for a hand job or a finger bang or a second base.
Oh.
Don't do it. The people, you are being watched. It just because it is dark doesn't mean people can't see you, you fucking moron. At first, when the footage came out of Boebert and her date sort of being handsy with each other, I thought, are we being like too hard on her and not hard enough on this guy? But then I was like, no, this guy is just some fucking guy. Like he's gross and he's trash. Also, she is gross and she's trash, and she is a member of Congress who has made it her business to regulate the sexuality of other people and to accuse trans people and LGBTQ people of being groomers when she is like performing sex. I mean, she is a trash and a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Like at least the guy she was with, just plain trash. She's trash and a hypocrite.
Yes.
Yeah, it is baffling to me. Like,
as my niece would say, she exhausting.
She doesn't know how to act.
No.
We can't. We got to elect. Look, Fetterman is a great example of somebody who's just sort of like, he just is who he is. They're relaxing the dress code so he can wear his XXL hoodies in Congress, whatever. I am not offended by him wearing whatever. I'm not offended by people wearing basically whatever they want in Congress. Boebert can wear her like, cocktail waitress, Vegas cocktail waitress getup that she wore to the Beetlejuice thing to Congress for all I care. I don't care. But yeah, she's just like trash and doesn't know how to act.
No, she has no home training.
No home training. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Minnesota Senator Lindsey Port on how her state was able to get so much done this session. Welcome back. You're listening to Hysteria, the podcast that fits a lot into a small bucket, the Sweet Martha's cookie jar of podcasts. Minnesotans know what I'm talking about. Sweet Martha's cookie jar, Minnesota State Fair institution. And speaking of Minnesota, our guest today has been a state senator in Minnesota since 2020. She's the chair and founder of the state's Reproductive Freedom Caucus, and she spends her time fighting for all the things we love on Hysteria, from environmental legislation to paid family leave. Senator Lindsey Port, welcome to Hysteria.
So nice to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're excited to talk to you because we talk about bummers a lot. And I feel like Minnesota is such a bright, shining star in a sea of bummers a lot of times. The list of policies Minnesota passed during the 2023 legislative session is so impressive. But before we get into details of what passed, how were you able to do it?
It's a really good question. We built the machine to be able to pass that amount of policy really through the campaign. In 2020, I think a lot of people didn't think we could win the Senate. We were in the minority. It was looking like a tough year for Democrats. But frankly, a bunch of women decided, looking at all of, as you put it, the bummers that are happening around the world, women were pissed off. And we felt like it was a real opportunity to talk about women's rights, to talk about the things that we as women, as mothers, as students really wanted from our communities. And so we went out and fought for that through the campaign. We won, and we put women in leadership, and we really just started running on day one and did not stop until session was done.
Yes. You were chief author of the cannabis bill that passed earlier this year, legalizing recreational use. What makes this bill such a unique progressive one, especially compared to the way weed was legalized in other states?
Yeah, we really tried to learn from the lessons that other states had done. We wanted to pass the most progressive, social equity focused bill, and really create a model for other states to follow. So we tried to take what had worked in other states, and then learn lessons from what had not worked. We put the expungement piece at the center of the bill. We're the only state that has automatic expungements. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to fill out a form or go into a courthouse or apply. It automatically happens for all non-felony convictions, so misdemeanors that over 60,000 people have in Minnesota. So that's a huge part right away. And then we really built social equity applicants as the sort of second centerpiece of it. We knew that as this policy takes place, as a whole industry stands up in Minnesota, we wanted to make sure that the communities that had been most harmed were really poised to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that we were setting up with building a whole new industry. So we created social equity applicants, which will be first in line to get licenses to be able to grow, to sell, to distribute. We knew that that had to be kind of the cornerstone of the bill that we put into place.
Mm-hmm. Well, my brother is a public defender in Duluth, and I feel like he got to have some really nice conversations with some of his clients as a result of that bill being
finally,
passed.
right?
Yeah, seriously. Another win we wanted to highlight was paid family and medical leave, which is now available for up to 12 weeks at a time in your state. Have you already started seeing the impact of this bill since it passed? And if so, how does that look?
Yeah, it's not up and running yet. We're getting the administration sort of piece of it up and running this year, and then it'll start to take effect next year. But we're already getting people asking about it. And we have seen that more private employers are starting to offer to fill that gap from now until it starts, because as soon as it passed, employees started clamoring for it. It really is outrageous that we are a country that doesn't offer standardized paid family leave. This really felt like a key piece. It's a thing we heard about a lot in rural Minnesota, actually. Across greater Minnesota, this is a thing that, like, there's not someone to necessarily fill in a gap when you're not able to work. You can't pick up a little part-time job that maybe you can do from home, that you can, try to make ends meet. That just doesn't exist in parts of the state. But the need to take care of parents when they're aging and sick, to take care of a sick family member, and to bond with your new child is just something people shouldn't have to choose between that and a paycheck. We're really excited how much positive reaction we've gotten from that bill.
Mm-hmm. And I can say I live in California right now, but I grew up in the Twin Cities area, but across the border in Wisconsin. And a lot of people in a high cost of living state like California now, especially with kids, are talking about relocating. It's just gotten to a point where a lot of people are like, we can't live here anymore. Like, we should go somewhere. Minnesota is a state that is in the mix when people talk about relocating. And I think part of it is because they're taking proactive steps to be hospitable to families. They're not taking actively hostile steps like a lot of states are. So, I honestly, this is just me reading the vibes. I wouldn't be surprised if there were people from higher cost of living states choosing Minnesota because of the care that you guys have taken to show for people who have families that they need to care for. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. I think people sometimes think policies are like, oh, it's just this academic policy. But we really tried this year to think about quality of life for people. What does it mean in the everyday lives? Which paid family leave is a huge part of, but so is universal meals for kids in schools. So is the PRO Act that protects, codifies into law a person's right to reproductive freedom and reproductive health care. So is the trans refuge bill. We wanted families in Minnesota who have trans kids or trans family members to know that Minnesota is a safe place to come. So it really kind of spanned the whole gamut of what we put together this year. And we welcome people, Minnesota is open. Come and join us.
You just talked about the Protect Reproductive Freedom Options, or PRO Act, as it's also called. You're also a member of the Reproductive Freedom Caucus. Erin and I are our own Reproductive Freedom Caucus over
I love
here.
it. You can join ours too.
Is there anything else about the bill that we should know? And what else is the Reproductive Freedom Caucus going to tackle in the coming sessions?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the Reproductive Freedom Caucus. It was something we started during 2020 as we were watching sort of the world crumble around reproductive freedom. And we saw the writing on the wall that it was likely the Supreme Court was going to strike down Roe. And so we started it. We now have 88 members between the House and the Senate. It's the biggest legislative caucus. And it's the first time we've had a Reproductive Freedom Caucus that's actually focused on this work.
Are there men? Are there men in the caucus?
There are a lot of men, yeah. Though I will say it's led by women.
As it should be.
And really the work is done there. The PRO Act was a huge lift. We passed it in the first couple of weeks of session. And it was, in Minnesota, we say interesting. It was interesting to see the reaction. I will never forget one of my colleagues on the floor sort of yelling at us to, ladies, come to your senses. Like we were just this band of crazy women asking for some absurd thing rather than just saying a person and their doctor should have the right to make the decisions about what happens with your body. It was a 15-hour-long debate that went till 5 a.m. It was absurd. And for us, that was starting point number one. We also removed most of the restrictions on abortion. So like, a 24-hour waiting period after a doctor reads you a statement that says an abortion may cause ovarian cancer, which it does not. Things like that. We removed all of those restrictions, most of which had been already ruled unconstitutional in Minnesota, but were still on the books. So we really tried to broaden the availability and access for people to get abortion care, especially because we knew people would be coming here from other states. So that was a huge part of it. We also worked on the trans refuge bill. That was a big key piece for us to make sure that trans kids here in Minnesota and in other states would know that this was a place they could come to. We passed the Reproductive Freedom Defense Act to protect doctors in Minnesota who provide abortions to patients from states where it's restricted, that Minnesota will not go along with those sort of prosecutions across state lines, things like that. And for next year, we're focusing on accessibility. So continuing to raise the rates that providers are paid through Medicare. We want universal abortion coverage on all insurance. And we're looking at making sure that there's universal coverage, $0 out-of-pocket coverage for over-the-counter birth control as we're looking at that come online as well.
Alyssa and I have talked about this on this show about how, like, post-Dobbs, states that have protected reproductive freedom are states that are going to be more appealing to pretty much every person of reproductive age. Like from college, I would imagine if I was a prospective freshman in college and I was choosing between being a golden gopher or being a badger, I would probably choose going to Minnesota.
As a Badger, I would say I would probably choose being a gopher at this point, too.
Yeah, I mean, is that something that you have discussed? Like the state in general is kind of, it gives you almost like a competitive advantage for like the best workers, for the best students, for like it's really, I'm interested in seeing how the next 5 years or so will play out, because it seems like you guys are laying the groundwork to make Minnesota a place that people are like, oh yeah, that's like one of the best states. Let's go there.
Yeah, that was one of the arguments we made. There's, multiple arguments you can make on all of these, right? It's the right thing to do. It helps support equality. It's social justice. It moves us forward. And then sometimes that message still doesn't work with some of our colleagues. And they're like, oh, but it's hard, or I don't want to get yelled at, or I don't know, that seems like a lot. Can't we not talk about abortion anymore? And that's when we could make the economic argument too, right? Like, we are making Minnesota a great state to live in. And workers are very mobile these days. You can move states, you can live in one state and work in another state. We wanted to make sure that Minnesota was a place people wanted to choose to come to.
Mm-hmm. So something that feels ripe for spooky season. We start spooky season here like September 1.
I love that.
Yeah. We hear Minnesota is cooking up some legal action that might prevent Trump from being on the ballot next year. So tell us more, because we'd love to hear that story.
Yeah. So it's come up. There's a group of people who, believe that he's already done enough, treason against our country to not be able to be on the ballot. And they're moving forward with a lawsuit. We'll have to see where it goes. But I think, our work will never stop to make sure that this is not a place where, even if he is on the ballot, that he could get elected again. I ran for the first time in 2016 for the state house. I lost that night, and losing sucks. But losing when you also watch Donald Trump win is just like a special kind of brutal that I just can't, we can't go back. We cannot go back. And so we're already starting the work to make sure that that's not the kind of person that Minnesota would elect again.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's also your superhero origin story, I think.
Yes. Totally.
That's how we start. Cut to.
Yes, exactly.
Senator Lindsey Port, thank you so much for joining us on Hysteria. Congratulations on all you've accomplished in Minnesota, and we look forward to what's next.
Thank you very much.